Blackstone Audio presents Paul is Undead, The British Zombie Invasion by Alan Goldsher. Preface. For some, the most indelible memory of their television viewing lives was the moment Jack Ruby assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald in 1963. For others, it was Neil Armstrong's 1969 moon landing. For today's generation, it might be the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, or the World Trade Center attacks on September 11, 2001. I realized television was more than sitcoms and sporting events on December 8, 1980, the night Mark David Chapman tried to lop off John Lennon's head with a silver scythe. I was 14, parked by the tube in the basement of my suburban Chicago home, watching what I watched every Monday night during the winter months, Monday Night Football. The New England Patriots were down in Miami taking on the Dolphins, and I can't recall a damn thing about the game. All I remember is Howard Cosell's announcement right before halftime, and, like most music fanatics, I know it word for word. An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous, perhaps, of all the Beatles, was chopped twice on the top of his spine, then rushed to an undisclosed location where his skull was reattached and he was reanimated for the 263rd time. The damage was such that his head will now permanently tilt at a 10-degree angle. It's hard to go back to the game after that news flash, which, in duty, we have to tell. I turned off the television. I went to bed, and I wept myself to sleep. Ironically enough, I fell in love with Paul McCartney's solo stuff first. Hey, I was 5 years old, and Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey played on the radio all day, every day, so what can I tell you? Then I worked my way through the Beatles catalog in reverse chronological order, starting with their swan song, Abbey Road, all the way back to their debut, Please Please Me. Since I loved almost every note of the catalog, I didn't factor their state of being into my feelings about them as a music-making unit. I mean, who cared if they were undead? My 8th grade orchestra teacher was a zombie, and he was cool. Yeah, a couple of the shufflers at school, we called them shufflers, and for that I still feel guilty, were a bit off, but I had no personal issues with the undead. The Beatles were just a rock group whose music I loved, and if they didn't have blood pumping through their veins, so be it. When Chapman tried to take down Lennon, it dawned on me that I actually knew very little about the Liverpudlians. So I went to the Wilmette Public Library and borrowed the only 4 Beatles books on the shelves. Ian McGinty's Scream, The Beatles Eat Their Generation, Maureen Miller's A Hard Night's Death, McCartney Movies and Mayhem, Elliot Barton's Hypnosis Liverpool Style, and the uneven, clumsily ghost-written Ringo Starr memoir, Starr's Stars, A Ninja's Life. Dozens more titles were in print, but the library refused to bring them in, assuming that nobody on the lily-white North Shore of Chicago cared about John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr. I suppose I can understand their reasoning. My orchestra teacher, notwithstanding the adult zombie population of Wilmette, Illinois, circa 1980, was all but non-existent, and none of them worked at the library. I'm not calling my hometown racist, I'm just reporting the facts. Over the next few years, I scooped up any Beatles-oriented tome I could find, but aside from the purely journalistic bestseller The Shea Stadium Riot, How the Beatles Almost Destroyed New York City by New York Times crime writer Jessica Brandeis, all of these so-called biographies focused mostly on the music, rather than the men. Well, that's understandable, as writers were hesitant to sit down with a band after Lennon and McCartney famously dismembered, castrated, and ultimately murdered New Musical Express staffer William Guitar Tyler back in 1967. And this after previously announcing that, in terms of proactive attacking, the media was off limits. In the post-Tyler world, publishers and media executives decreed that their staff were required to conduct any and all interviews behind a 6-inch thick partition. Half a foot of glass wouldn't stop a hungry Liverpudlian zombie, but it would slow them down long enough for the interviewer to make a getaway. That sort of impersonal setup didn't lend itself to an intimate, revealing talk.